Britain's Labour government has been hit by a major political shock after Defence Secretary John Healey resigned in protest over military spending. In a strongly worded resignation letter to Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Healey said, "Britain faces a rapidly deteriorating security environment but is failing to invest enough in its armed forces." The departure marks the first major cabinet-level rebellion over national security and exposes deep tensions at the heart of the government over defence priorities.
This is a letter I never expected to write, and I do so now with great regret and reluctance. We came into government recognizing Britain faced a new era of threat, which demanded a new era for defence. The Strategic Defence Review we jointly commissioned set the 10-year vision to transform our armed forces, strengthen alliances, and invest in the technology that is changing warfare.
At the centre of the dispute is the government's defence investment plan. Healey argues that Britain should commit to spending 3% of GDP on defence by 2030, saying the target would enjoy broad political support and mirror steps already being taken by European allies. Instead, he claims the government's current plan delays meaningful increases and leaves the military facing growing challenges without adequate resources.
As we have regularly discussed, I am certain that a headmark date for 3% of GDP on defence in 2030 is what Britain must set. This commitment would have strong cross-party support. Other European allies are stepping up in this way. However, your DIP financial settlement falls well short of what is required for defence and the country at this dangerous time.
The resignation letter delivers an unusually direct criticism of both Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Chancellor Rachel Reeves. Healey says a cross-government review completed earlier this year had already identified rising defence requirements. Yet despite those findings, he claims the government failed to match growing military commitments with the funding needed to support them.
This new era for defence required further investment through the Defence Investment Plan. The excellent and extensive cross-government work that completed in January confirmed the scale of the challenge and the rising demands on defence. Since then, you have been unable, and the Treasury has been unwilling, to commit the resources that the nation needs to defend the country at this time of rising threats.
Healey also points to a series of mounting security pressures facing Britain. He references Russia's war in Ukraine, instability in the Middle East, increased NATO commitments, and rising Russian military activity around the alliance. Most significantly, he cites intelligence assessments suggesting Moscow could pose a direct threat to NATO before the end of the decade, arguing that military readiness must be strengthened immediately rather than years from now.
You spelled out the threats last week. It is our intelligence assessment and the assessment of other countries in NATO that there could be an attack by Russia on NATO as soon as 2030. You know what defense needs. You made the argument for this powerfully in your speech at the Munich Security Conference back in February.
Despite praising Labour's achievements on Ukraine, NATO leadership, and defence reforms, Healey concludes that he can no longer remain in office while overseeing what he believes is an underfunded military strategy. In the most damaging section of his resignation letter, he warns that the government's approach risks weakening Britain's armed forces at a time when security threats are intensifying across Europe and beyond.
Without a dip that meets the moment in this way, I am being forced to make decisions that would reduce the readiness of our forces and increase the risk to personnel on operations, and could make the country less safe. After explaining to you that I would not be able to accept a dip settlement that does not give our forces the resources they need, I am now left with no other option than to submit my resignation as your Defence Secretary.